Gators Breakdown, episode 96 is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And co-host tonight is Joe Vizzi. Joe, let me know where you can find you on Twitter. I forgot that you changed it and I didn't update it here in my notes.
Yeah. At Joe_UF Breakdown.
And there we go, the new Twitter handle for Joe V out there. So, Joe, definitely something we don't want to have to talk about during a football season, but we finally have an update on the non-suspended players for the Gators, and that kind of leads the way right now, even though it was a newsy day kind of things that happened on the field with Luke Del Rio being named starter. But the headline that definitely grabbed today was we got an update on these 9 players who were suspended and felony complaints now against these players, of course, led by Antonio Callaway and Jordan Scarlett.
Yeah, I was pretty much, jumped on it right away, and I combed through every affidavit for every player, and you were, seeing some of my tweets earlier. This is no joke. I mean, this is serious stuff here. I actually called my uncle, who's a former detective, and I pretty much explained to him what the affidavits had read. I just kind of wanted him to clear it up for me. And he basically said this sounds like a credit card theft ring, like one where they bust in a sting and 30, 40, 50 people are arrested. And he did say that people can purchase credit card numbers and purchase Social Security numbers online. There are sites that sell them to people. And also, obviously, you can get them off the street from card skimmers. People will use card skimmers on gas pumps. And that happened to me actually a couple years ago. And you can basically make a clone card of a person's number. And I don't know if that's what they did, but there was 13, 14 different people involved, I think, David, in like 10 different states. I mean, so that's what makes me think like this is maybe larger than the football players. There's maybe somebody in Gainesville that was actually, running this sort of credit card fraud ring, and the players just somehow got involved in it through, supposedly Jordan Smith, who is quote unquote the ringleader. Obviously Jordan Smith and Kadeem Telford are looking at some serious stuff. Jordan Smith used 5 different credit cards from 5 different people to pay his bills and to buy things. Obviously, Kadeem Telford has over 30 felony charges against him, because of all the purchases he made. You got to think each purchase over $300 is a felony charge. So if you steal someone's credit card and you buy something for $300 or more, each time you purchase something, it's a charge. So I'm assuming it's because he bought so much stuff that's why he had so many charges against him. But as you said, we welcome in Mark Moses. Thanks, Mark, for joining us tonight. How are you, Mark? Can you hear us, Mark?
Nope, probably not. I think he just muted himself too. So I don't hear him. I see his mouth moving, but I don't hear him.
Well, these felony affidavits are, like you said, David, they're sworn complaints basically from the police department to the state attorney's office. And that's another thing that I asked my uncle about as well. And basically what they are is the police do their investigation. There's multiple stages. Hey, Mark, can you hear us?
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes, yep. We got you, Mark. We're just bringing you in right now. Guys, this is Mark Moses from 1560 The Fan in Melbourne, Florida. He's joining us tonight to talk the latest on the charges brought onto the Florida players. Mark, I was just actually explaining to our viewers out there kind of what happened with reading the affidavits earlier and with the credit card stuff. I don't know if you actually got a chance to read it, but I was just explaining that my uncle's a retired detective, and I actually had to call him to ask him kind of what these things meant. And I was just saying that basically the police department did their investigation, interviewed a bunch of people, got their stuff together, and they submitted everything they had, basically like a discovery kind of to the state attorney's office. And the state attorney's office now has only a certain amount of time to formally file charges against these players. But reading these affidavits, I highly doubt that these charges are not brought forward soon. So, I don't know what your thoughts on the situation are, what your knowledge is up to speed on this.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on the show, first off. I always love coming on Gators Breakdown. This is the thing. This is not new to us. We knew there were allegations back in late summer started. The Florida Gators football program got in front of this before the season even started. Now, Joey, like you're saying, it came out now. Okay, from the like you're saying, charges, third-degree credit charges. I was looking at this story after I got off work today where it's like if it's a first-time offender, you might get probation. If you're a multiple-time offender, forget about playing football. You might be out of the University of Florida, and even worse, you might go see some jail time as well. That's why when I look at this story, I've moved on from these players. I know other people around the SEC are ripping the Florida Gators tonight, saying that this is awful, this is terrible. I don't know about you guys, but I've moved on. I was watching the Kentucky game like you guys. I'm already looking at these new players and guys like Jordan Scarlett, and you look at Antonio Callaway from them. I personally can't do anything else with Antonio Callaway. Is this the third strike for him? That's what I would ask you. Is he got in trouble three different times?
He's done, Mark. If there's anybody in that list that's probably out of there, David, you and I can both agree. We've talked about it ad nauseum. Antonio Callaway's done. I had told you last week and several others that I was told he'd already been asked to clean out his locker, and he has not been in class in some time. So obviously, I'm assuming that they've already dismissed him from the team, from what I was told. So I'm pretty sure he's done. And Mark, we did know about this, but we didn't know how serious it was. And I was just explaining before you jumped on, when I asked my uncle and read to him what was going on, and he kind of got read up on it. He said it sounds like a credit card fraud ring, something that, had multiple people involved, many people involved, because Mark, there was 13 or 14 different victims from around the country that their cards were used. People that these players didn't even know. It's not like they stole a roommate's credit card or somebody that they found a credit card in a restaurant in Gainesville and used it. Mark, they were getting numbers of credit cards from people that had no knowledge or no affiliation or maybe never even stepped foot in the state of Florida before. So that's why this sounds like it could be a lot deeper than just these 9 players. And some of the charges, Kadeem Telford, 30 felonies against him. Jordan Smith, multiple felonies. So, I guess it's more serious than we anticipated, I guess, if there's any sort of shocker that came out today. And I'm sure, David, you can kind of follow up with this. But, obviously Callaway, gone. Scarlett, we don't know, but I'm with Mark. I've moved on already. We just didn't know the severity of this stuff, and it's bad.
Yeah. Part of it is, and even if the charges are dropped or get downgraded to misdemeanors, with the past Antonio Callaway has had, it is time to move on. It doesn't matter to me if charges are dropped along with him. With everything he's put this university through and put Jim McElwain through, it is time to move on. So to summarize, before we move further, you guys all know how it started, and now the case rests with in the hands of the state attorney's office. But Antonio Callaway, Jordan Scarlett are facing 2 third-degree felony charges, and Jordan Smith is facing 5 third-degree felony charges. Defensive tackle Richard Desir Jones, defensive end Kavanis Davis, linebackers James Houston and Ventrell Miller, wide receiver Rick Wells all face 2 charges. Offensive tackle Kadeem Telford faces 30 charges. The investigation was 9 players involved in making various purchases using the several different stolen credit card numbers. That's what Joey's talking about. This is why it kind of sounds like a credit card ring. This was to fund their school debit card accounts. They moved money to those accounts. Telford's transactions were mostly for food delivery snacks from local establishments or convenience stores. The affidavits reveal that Miller, Callaway, Scarlett, Desir Jones, Houston, and Smith have settled their accounts with the UF bookstore. Unclear if Rick Wells or Telford or Davis has. And then Matt Baker, the Tampa Bay Times, had an article with statements from State Attorney Bill, is it Cervone, guys?
Cervone.
Yeah, Cervone. The process could take several weeks at minimum, he says. I don't have to reinvent the wheel, Cervone, but there's still a lot of details that need to be tracked down. So while Cervone said the cases are still fairly routine, some of the details released Monday from the university investigation are jaw-dropping. Players could still qualify for pretrial intervention programs that could lead to reduced or dropped charges. Cervone said the only 2 players who probably will not qualify for that program are Telford and Smith, who are responsible for 48 of the complaints, and that comes from Matt Baker, the Tampa Bay Times. So Yeah, it does sound bad. It is a little bit worse than kind of what we were led to believe to begin with. This took some time, and now you can tell why it took some time. Look at everything that went on here. Fans were kind of impatient with this, kind of wondering why it took so long. I think we got our answer why today.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that these guys were kept out immediately, because who knows what the fallout would have been, David, with the university had this dropped, and these guys have played the last 3 games. Could you imagine? Oh, man, the University of Florida might have been in some big trouble. But like you said, mainly it's just the severity of everything. And, obviously a guy like Jordan Smith paid his bills with these credit cards. It wasn't like he just went out on a spending spree, a shopping spree. And he's actually subject to more charges. Isn't that correct, David? Isn't Gainesville Police Department running a separate investigation on Jordan Smith for an apartment that he paid rent with a stolen credit card? Isn't that correct? I believe.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't think it has anything to do with this. I think it is separate. Yeah.
It is separate. Yes. That's so. I mean, he may very well be that guy looking at some time. Mark, I'll bring you in on this. And, obviously you wrote these guys off, but is this a kind of a stain on Jim McElwain, or did he kind of wash his hands of this back in August when he got rid of everybody involved?
It's a great question. It really is. I tell people all the time, this is year 5 for me covering Florida Gator football. Every single year, it feels like there's some type of story outside of the football field. That's what's so crazy about this football team. Same thing with Florida State or Miami. There's always some crazy story. That's what's so disappointing with these type of stories. But this is the thing. Callaway and Scarlett, weren't those part of the first recruiting class for the University of Florida with Jim McElwain, 14? Yep. Aren't they both from South Florida? It's
almost everybody's from South Florida on this list. Yeah. Almost everybody is. I think Rick Wells might be the only one, right, David? That's not.
He's from here in Jacksonville. He's from here in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
This is not good, especially with the Gators are a couple plays from being 0-3 in year 3 of Jim McElwain. He needed a Hail Mary and the stupidity of the coaching staff of Kentucky for being 0-3. Then you have this. The only thing that can cure these type of stories is winning football games moving forward, and they're finding ways. And you go back to the Michigan game, I still can't get over this. You look at a Scarlett and you look at a guy like Callaway, if you're there, you probably help that team win against Michigan on national TV. What is your legacy now at the University of Florida? Fraud. That's what's so sad about these type of stories. And then what about the part, I don't know if you guys talked about this, where the girlfriend says he got it from an agent? That's the worst excuse possible.
Yeah. That's what Scarlett told her. That's what she said Scarlett told her. And I'm assuming he told her that because he didn't want to be in trouble with her.
And here's the thing. But even that is damning. I mean, come on. You got to come up with a better excuse than that if you kind of want to save you and the university.
And she lied to the police, too. In the affidavit, she actually told the police that she paid for that stuff with her card. She added the money on his student card with her card. So I don't know if she's subject to charges as well. I don't know.
And kind of extending upon that, you guys, you're talking about how this is kind of going now. Andy Staples released an article this evening. He had a take on it, and it could be pretty damaging for the players involved. And the reason is an attorney he talked to who has handled similar cases in Florida said the case may attract the interest of federal prosecutors working to stamp out credit card fraud and identity theft.
That's what I'm saying.
Quote, it would be something the feds would look at doing, said Tim Jansen, Tallahassee-based criminal defense attorney. I've seen them look into this with less money and less scheme. Jansen, a graduate of Florida's law school, whose highest profile case was defense of former Florida State quarterback Jameis Winston against the sexual assault accusation that he was dealing with, said the organization of this scheme, which involved the use of credit card numbers and addresses of people in 7 states and repeated use of same cardholders' information by different players, is what might pique the interest of the feds. And if they get interested, a mandatory minimum sentence of 2 years in federal prison for aggravated identity theft comes into play. And that was from Andy Staples. So, yeah, I mean, this is no small matter. And
you cross state lines, David. You cross state lines. That's federal. If they had just stolen a credit card, like I said, of a roommate or somebody they found in Gainesville, that's a local case. Federal, there's people from California involved, people from Indiana, Connecticut, Michigan, Virginia. I mean, it's all over the place. This is federal. You're exactly right, David. Good job bringing that point up from Andy Staples, because I would not be surprised if there's federal charges brought on at least one person or maybe two.
Yeah, Mark, what do you think about that? I mean, I don't think we thought about it in terms of when this was first announced. Okay, it kind of sounded, okay, here we go. Just they took advantage of a school system and they got some things just like electronics, but then started hearing some things, started hearing some rumors, the reason it was taking so long, and now it could even go as far as federal prosecution and these guys getting prison time.
Yeah, it's a good point. Look, I've covered college football in different conferences. As you know, there are knuckleheads on every single college football team. You just don't hear about it every 5 seconds. And sometimes I stand up for the coaches where, hey, maybe there's 75 guys on the roster. You're going to have 2 or 3 guys screw up. But 9 guys, right, where they're all kind of maybe working together on this, like you said, and Joey said it best, it's past state lines. The best thing I can give these guys right now, attorney for over 3 decades. Time to lawyer up, my friend, because this does not look good for some of these football players.
Yeah, and I will hold Jim McElwain to some sort of accountability. And it's not because obviously he did something wrong per se, but I think he's cared too much, David, about these kids. I think he's looked past things in their backgrounds and stuff that they've done. And he actually made a comment today in his press conference, David. He said, I hate to see this done to good kids. They're good kids. We need to look into what we can do to help them out. And it's kind of like you can only do so much to help someone out if they won't help themselves. My parents taught me that as a young boy. I'll never forget my dad telling me, I'll only help you if you help yourself. And that's kind of got to be, that's part of growing into a man, right, David? I mean, Antonio Callaway can't help himself. Why would you want to continue to help him? I understand you have an emotional attachment to these young men. You're in their living rooms. You build a relationship with them, with their families, with their brothers, sisters, parents, cousins, neighbors. But there comes a point, David, where screw me once, shame on you. Screw me twice, shame on me. Comes into play, and I will hold McElwain accountable for some of these guys for looking past issues before that maybe could have prevented this from happening at Florida, and maybe he could have sent them packing a while ago. We talked about Antonio Callaway, but Jordan Scarlett, he was busted for marijuana possession before. There's sometimes where there is smoke, there is fire, and I hate to throw people under the bus and not give people a chance either, because Lord, I've made mistakes. Everybody has. We all make mistakes. But there comes a point where you have to tell somebody, look, you have to go and get your life together somewhere else because you're dragging everyone else around you down. And I think that's the case with some of these kids.
Yeah, there's a difference what is college for? We all been there, and it's to grow up, to learn from your mistakes. You're going to make them there and become a man or a woman and move on with your life with the things you've learned in those years. They knew what they were doing. This was not kids would be kids. This was more than that. This was them being dumb. This was them taking advantage of a system. This was them
deceiving. Yes. It was taking advantage of people.
And
there's no other way to say it.
And people's hard-earned money.
Yes.
These were, you took livelihoods from these people that I don't know the financial backings of these people that they took money from, but first of all, you probably ruined their credit, and that's a big thing in and of itself. This was not just kids to be kids, a college mistake.
No,
this is pretty dadgum serious, and if the charges are dropped or downgraded, I don't care. They knew what they were doing. Now, some of them, this is their first offense, and I don't necessarily think you get rid of those guys. But some of the guys for the most serious of the case, and some of the guys who have gotten in trouble with other things in the past, like Callaway and Scarlett, it's time to move on.
Yeah, Mark, you can probably back me up on this. There's only so much you can do for people.
Let me tell you something. I was watching the Kentucky game just like you guys. I wasn't thinking about these players. Yeah. I was not. They didn't even cross my mind. I was thinking about, can someone throw the ball over 10 yards for completion? That's what I was worried about. And this is the thing. Luckily, you had guys like Powell and Tony step up. because if they didn't, I don't know what they were going to do with the void with no Antonio Callaway. I had big expectations for him. Joey was on my show live before the Michigan game. I asked him the question, can you think Jordan Scarlett can get to 1,200 yards this year? He answered with, "Dear Lord, Mark, Jordan Scarlett is suspended for the opener."
Yep.
That's
Broke
what happened.
live right on your show. Real time.
I remember that.
But now I've moved on. I'm telling you, I'm not even thinking about these guys. I'm thinking, how can the Gators beat Vandy and go to 3-0 in conference play? That's what I'm worried about.
And as you should.
Yeah, and that's about where we're going next, because, Joe, you got anything else about it?
You know what? I wish these kids well, and I hope we get some of them back. But there's one person I don't want back, and that's Mr. Callaway. I really hope he gets his life together. That's all. We've talked about him too much, David. We gave him too much airtime, over the last couple months. He has a problem. Whether it's bad parenting, growing up in the neighborhood he grew up in, I don't know. I don't know his background. I did meet his mother before, actually. I met his mother when he was a freshman for the Ole Miss game, and she's a very nice lady. She was very, very kind, very sweet lady. I don't know how he grew up and whatnot, but he needs to get his life together, and he needs to go somewhere to get some help, whether that's another university or maybe away from the football field for a while. So I really wish him well. These other kids, I don't really know. Rick Wells had the BB gun incident before, David, obviously. So that was on his record before. But these other freshmen, don't start your life this way. You're 18 years old. You just got to college. Don't ruin your life when your life basically just begins. And that's really all I'm going to say. I want to move on from talking about this. Obviously, when the charges come and the players are arrested, David, we're going to have to talk about it again just because it's going to be breaking news, and that's what we do on this show. But as far as, talking about these guys coming back, I don't want to talk about it until somebody does come back. So I'm thinking like Mark is right now, let's go out and beat Vandy, take care of business. This team is kind of seems to be finding itself, and that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm done talking about these players.
Yep, and I'll hit it again tomorrow night to help us break it all down. Trey Wallace from reporter and co-host of the Ultimate SEC Show and college football reporter for the Read Optional, the guy who's been on top of this story from the get-go, from afar up in Tennessee. I know a lot of people were questioning how he gets his info. That's not the important part. He had the info, and that's the important part. He kept everyone in the know with the timeline going on. So he'll be on tomorrow, Gators Breakdown, and we'll dive into it just a little bit more. But it's time to talk some real football. And the big story, guys, of what happened, we kind of thought it would happen after what happened Saturday night when Luke Del Rio replaced Felipe Franks. But Luke Del Rio is named starter, much of it based on how he came in versus Kentucky and settled the offense down. For whatever the reason, the offense didn't run the ball as much as they should have with Franks. But Del Rio comes in, and they moved the ball with a little more focus on the run, and Del Rio hitting a clutch throw or two. It just looked more like a cohesive unit with what Del Rio brings to the table pre-snap. Now, Florida has found some playmakers in Kadarius Toney and Malik Davis to go along with Brandon Powell and Tyree Cleveland. If Del Rio can simply take care of the ball, then maybe the offense progresses enough to get off to better starts, put some points on the board, and help this defense. So, Joe, I mean, it's not really a surprise Del Rio was named starter today, right?
I'm going to let Mark lead with this one.
There we go.
All right. I appreciate that, Joey. Here's the thing. My biggest complaint and concern about Jim McElwain and fire Doug Nussmeier, you have to say it because that's how it's said on Twitter at all times, all right? You just say that. It's not the play calling. It's not understanding your personnel. We were in game 3, halfway through the third quarter, and you're still not sure who your starting running back is, who your number one go-to wide receiver is, or who your quarterback is. It's game 3, guys, of the third year. You guys are the coaching staff. How do you not know already that this is what it should be? And I can't believe I'm going to say this. You guys do a great podcast. I've seen enough of Felipe Franks. I know he's a freshman. He cannot be the starter for this team moving forward. I feel like I could do a better job under center. I have seen enough of him. Was not even part of the game plan in spring practice, all of summer, and fall camp. But he is your guy moving forward. At least he knows how to put the ball down the field. It has to be, and I put this on Twitter, starter, if you want to try to win this division, Davis is going to be your starting running back. I've seen enough of P. Ryan, and for the love of God, I don't want to see Mark Thompson get 20 carries. It's those guys, right? Davis is your starter. It's Powell, Tony is wide receiver, and Cleveland. Those are your guys on offense. Stick with them and just stop messing with the first half where you don't know what you're doing. That has to be it. And look, this team can get back to Atlanta. All right? I know CBS, ESPN, the Georgia Bulldogs, Tennessee, none of them want to see that again. The Gators can go back. And I'll put it this way. I went on Priceline and already bought my flight to Atlanta for December. I am that confident we're going back. I'm going to do my show. Hopefully you guys come with me.
Well, my second child is due the week before, so that's probably not going to happen for me. So I wish I could, but my wife would probably tell me not to come home.
Just take a week-old baby with you.
Yeah, but I will say this, David and Mark, what we haven't talked about with Del Rio starting. You notice how the offensive line got better when Del Rio was behind center? It's because Del Rio knows how to call out protections. It's the stuff he does before the ball is even snapped that a guy like Franks can't do. Del Rio was pointing out blitzes. He was pointing out guys, one thing we've never accused Del Rio of was being stupid. I mean, he's a very smart kid. He knows the film room. He studies the playbook. He's been in the system for 2 years now. He knows what he's doing pre-snap. And if that's going to help the offensive line play better, then that's going to help the running backs do better. So that right there is a bonus in itself for having Del Rio behind center. Del Rio obviously doesn't have the talent that Franks does, the arm talent, I mean. But if he brings the other stuff to go along with it, like the pre-snap reads, not making mistakes, that throw to Mark Thompson on 4th down was sensational, by the way. No way Felipe Franks sees that. No way Felipe Franks makes that throw. Hit Powell on that wheel route, where Powell stepped out of bounds, killed. Beautiful throw. Beautiful throw. It's there. We've seen it last year. David, we talked ad nauseum last year about Del Rio prior to the injury looked like the second coming. Post knee injury, he completely turned into a different quarterback. It was almost like we talked about it. Was he scared? Was he scared to get hit maybe? That knee really hurt him so much that maybe he was just a little worried. He was jumpy in the pocket, but he won.
And if he's telling the truth, it wasn't just his knee, it was the shoulder as well.
Yes, and Jim McElwain admitted after the Arkansas game that Del Rio should have never even been playing against Arkansas. He said his shoulder was so bad that he couldn't move his arm after that game. They said he couldn't even move his arm. His shoulder was so bad. So if that's the case, then and Del Rio's perfectly healthy right now, why not? Why not? I see no reason why Del Rio should not start. We got sick to our stomachs when we heard the rumors that he might be named the starter in August. We really wanted to see Franks. We wanted to see Zaire. We wanted to see what they both could bring to the table because we knew, Del Rio's kind of ceiling, so to say. But this team is not made for either of those other guys. Felipe Franks is too young and too raw to have a defense that is not that great. Now, if you had played Franks, David and Mark, last year, with that defense last year, I think Florida could have won more games last year. But with this defense, it's made perfect for Del Rio because Del Rio is a guy that hopefully can give you 10, 15-minute drives, and that's what you want. You want to keep your defense off the field to limit the mistakes on defense because, geez, these guys forgot how to tackle, man. I don't know what's going on. Chauncey Gardner and Nick Washington might be the worst safety duo we've had in a while. We really undersold guys Marcel Harris's injury. And we're seeing it big time. Marcel Harris's leadership back there and him just really liking to hit everything that moves really is hurting right now. It's great to see Voshon Joseph, being who he is. And Florida's defense is going to be awesome next year. I mean, you got Marco Wilson and C.J. Henderson coming back as your starting corners next year. I think the defense is going to be great next year. So we can talk next year after the season. But for right now, in this defensive scheme and how they're playing and how young they are, and your offense kind of has the most weapons it's had in many years, I think Del Rio is the perfect quarterback. Now you got to keep him healthy. That's the key.
And the best way to do that, and maybe the identity, there's no quarterback identity right now, but maybe the identity of the offense was starting to come to light with when Del Rio was behind center and under center a lot of the time and handing the ball off and being I don't necessarily know a power run team, but they were power at times. They ran some zone at times. They ran some stretch at times. But they were pretty much doing whatever they wanted to do late in that game as far as running the ball goes. So maybe the identity is Del Rio smart enough to help the offensive line out. He could help TJ McCoy call out the blitzes, call out whatever the defense is doing in alignment, help that, and maybe that's part of one reason the running game did take off, as you were saying. So, it is maybe the identity is becoming the run team McElwain kind of wanted to be, but he needed the quarterback to kind of help it and help the offensive line a little bit. I still have my doubts that they can be the power run team Jim McElwain wants, and the quarterback is going to have to win a game a time or two, especially with LSU and Georgia coming up.
Well, I don't know about that, David. Malik Davis seems like he's a power back.
It's not.
He can run between the tackles.
My worry has always been this offense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, they look pretty good with Del Rio.
I really like the skill players, and that's how I've always been about going to the season. I just had my doubts with what Jim McElwain wants to do and a power run game. I just don't know. So I think there's a good, Mark was saying, there's a good nucleus there. You know who the playmakers are now. Expand on that. Use those guys in creative ways, imaginative ways, if Doug Nussmeier can do it and get that. So the next thing I want to go to, guys, is what does this mean for Felipe Franks and his development? Is it him or the coaches? Many have noticed his ability to make much happen in the passing game, or his inability to make much happen in the passing game if his first read isn't there. That's leading him to not even seeing open wide receivers past his first read. He should know the playbook by now, but it seems if the defense does something different, then he can't adjust very well to that. So are the coaches afraid to trust him with those problem areas? Well, we've seen the playbook get very limited to him where every pass is short. I think there are two things there. One is to get the ball out of his hands so the pressure doesn't get to him, and the other is simply that they aren't as comfortable with him reading a defense right now. So his best feature is his big arm, but we haven't been able to see that on display the last two games, except the game winner versus Tennessee. So his best feature is not being used in pressing the ball downfield right now. Everything is within a 5 to 7 yard pass range. So what can we blame this development on Felipe Franks? He's a red shirt. This is his second year in the system. Is it the coaches or is it him, or probably a combination of both?
Well, David, wasn't it myself that was reporting on Gators Breakdown all summer that the coaches went and got Malik Zaire because they still didn't trust Felipe Franks? I mean, it's now almost October, and it seems like that's still the case, right? They obviously have not opened the playbook for him because they don't feel like he can handle it. No one has accused Doug Nussmeier of being a great offensive coordinator. In fact, I went on Twitter after that game on Saturday night and said, I'm done with him. I watched enough dive plays on 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7 to pretty much write him off. I'm over it. Unless he significantly shows improvement over the next 6 games, I can't take him seriously anymore. David, I think that Jim McElwain should take over the play calling, and maybe he will. Maybe he'll have bigger input in it. But I could tell that McElwain's frustrated with Doug Nussmeier. And I think Felipe Franks has been held back by Doug Nussmeier. I see that now. And I think it's also because Felipe Franks came in so raw. I still think that he's not even close to, a really good quarterback. And I think that was lack of coaching in high school added by lack of coaching by Doug Nussmeier and the staff. So like you said, it's probably a combination of both, David. And as long as Florida keeps winning, Felipe Franks is not going to see the field again. Obviously, if Del Rio gets hurt, God forbid, we don't want that to happen. Or he goes, starts stinking up the joint again. I just don't see Felipe Franks starting another game this season for Florida. And obviously with Matt Corral being, an early enrollee and the early signing period now, he's coming onto campus in January, and who knows how he's going to look in spring. So I mean, I'm not saying this now, but there is a chance that we never see Felipe Franks start another game as a quarterback at the University of Florida. I'm not saying it's going to happen or it's not going to happen. I'm just saying that there is that possibility.
Mark, do you think Franks was in? Do you think the reason he was named starter at the beginning of the season, was it just simply the coaches probably just wanted to see what they had in him and then move on from there?
I agree with you. I agree with what you guys are saying. The thing with Franks is he started, 3 games now? He's been benched twice. Just think about it. You've been benched twice in your 3 starts, okay? This is the thing. This is the SEC. If you're not sure what you have, go play at Florida International. And nothing against that school, but this is supposed to be the quarterback of the Florida Gators. You should know what you have, and you should know what you got on the field. You look at some players on this team, they just show up. I mean, even if they're a freshman, you look at Davis, like we were saying before, at the running back position. He just gets it, and he's out there and he's playing football. Tony's the real exception. The dude is not a wide receiver, and he looks like at times on the field like he could be the best receiver for the Florida Gators. Or if you put him in the Wildcat, who knows? When I look at Nussmeier, right, I feel like, okay, maybe with Del Rio in there, maybe he can start doing his offense he wants to do. You know what's the sexiest play, and it actually worked, which I liked, was the Wildcat for touchdowns.
Yeah.
They actually went with something, and it worked. I like they opened up the playbook. I said this at the beginning. I'll say it again. Man, I'm sorry. I can't keep having a starter getting benched, and then there's a halfway through the third quarter, and you're trying to figure it out. You're not going to take on the coaching of Kentucky moving forward. You're not going to get those benefited outs. You got to play better than this, and I got to go with Del Rio. That's got to be my bottom line.
Yeah,
he's the safest.
Yeah,
there you go, and that's kind of where I'm going to. I wanted Felipe Franks to be the guy because it would have spoken to the development from the coaching staff towards him. We're not getting that right now, but we wanted to see him progress with the offense. But you have to try and win games at the same time, and Michael Wayne feels it's best to do that with Luke Del Rio right now. Now, I think, and this was to Joey's point, and I tweeted this out yesterday, if Florida had their traditional vaunted defense, you could take your chances and ride with Franks. You can let him learn for a whole year because this defense more than likely was going to bail you out at times. But this offense has to score points and stay on the field, starting this week versus a pretty good Vandy defense, and the coaches feel better to go with Del Rio. So Joey said it, and I was going to bring it up too. With the way this defense is and the way they kind of start slow and teams are putting up points to begin with, maybe Del Rio gets this offense off to a faster start where the defense isn't getting worn out in the third and fourth quarter, and it helps the whole team because, as we mentioned, whatever reason, they went away from the run game with Franks against Kentucky. I don't really know why, but it did seem Del Rio gets in there, settles the team down, they start running the ball, and maybe that's the identity of this team right now.
And Mark, I'll piggyback off of what you said and kind of even take it a step further about winning the SEC East again. I think that if Jim McElwain said, look, we're gonna go through the growing pains. We're gonna play Franks all year. We're not gonna look back. We're just gonna deal with it. I think Florida's staring at a 5 or 6 win season with Franks. I think now that Florida's 2-0 in the SEC East and kind of finding itself, I think Jim McElwain is under the realization like, hey, we can actually win 9 or 10 games this year. So I think he's thinking about winning instead of just basically throwing the season in the toilet, which I think you would with Franks. I'm not saying that in a bad way, but I think that you're taking a chance to win 5 or 6 games and maybe not even making a bowl game with Felipe Franks because you're going to go through the growing pains. And who knows, he would probably be better by season's end just due to getting the reps. But I think Jim McElwain wants to win. He wants to win now, and I think he realizes that Luke Del Rio, out of the 3 quarterbacks that he has right now, gives this team with the defensive deficiencies. I can't believe I'm saying that, a Florida team with defensive deficiencies. He gives this team a chance to win. Think about this. Florida's had to win 2 shootouts in a row. Florida had to score 14 points in the fourth quarter. Guys, the Florida Gators drove down the field and scored 2 touchdowns with 10 minutes left in a game. Okay, when is the last time on offense that has happened? I mean, is it just me, or did everybody on Twitter basically give up on that game when we were down 13 points with 10 minutes left? And I was on Twitter saying, we're going to come back and win. As soon as Del Rio came in, things started to click, and Florida went down. Yes, the wide open pass, we know about that, but they still had to drive the ball down the field to get in that position, correct?
The second one doesn't matter to me. They're scoring there anyway.
Yes.
That just helped. But they're scoring there.
Yes.
The way they were running the ball, they're scoring that second wide open one either way.
Yes, exactly. So
what I was going to tell you guys is, real quick, Joey, it's like you look at the defense, you're saying it's not as good as last year. I agree with you. The key moving forward is time of possession.
Mm-hmm.
Have the defense, and we've wanted this for years with the Florida Gators. To 26, 27 minutes a game. Keep the defense fresh, because we've seen this. Once they get to the Florida State game, once they get to Atlanta, the defense is gassed and injured and then can't compete in those games. Make them a fresher, cleaner team moving forward. That's what the offense needs to do. Hey, I don't know about you guys on Gators Breakdown, points a game, all offensive touchdowns.
Yep.
I will take that SEC play moving forward.
Yeah, and fortunately for kind of looking ahead to this coming week against Vanderbilt, I think we saw that Vanderbilt's defense was a little overrated. I mean, granted, it was Alabama, but Alabama's not really known for having
Alabama
Big 12 offense,
and they were struggling.
Yeah,
on offense.
They were struggling on offense prior to that time. So and they hung 59 on Vanderbilt. So that gives me reason for hope that maybe Vanderbilt's defense is not as good as we originally anticipated, which could really help on Saturday. And one thing I really want to do is I just want to play a complete game. I'm sick of these third quarter, fourth quarter nail biters where we're thinking about how we can scrape out a win. I want to see Florida win from the shotgun to the last whistle. This is a game where you got to go out. It's in front of your home crowd. It's going to be noon. It's going to be hot. Florida has to get out there, score a couple touchdowns in the first quarter, score a couple touchdowns in the second quarter, and really dominate this game from start to finish. And I think that would not only give the fans hope, I think it would raise some eyebrows around the country and say, you know what? Maybe Florida is 3-1 for a reason right now.
Yeah. Before we move on to Vanderbilt right quick, Joe, I threw up the poll this morning, so it was before the announcement of Luke Del Rio being quarterback. I did throw out there who should be the Gators starting quarterback versus Vanderbilt. Out of 973 votes, Luke Del Rio is 65% of the vote, over 35% for Felipe Franks. And some of the Twitter post out there was Catherine Gator. She goes, "Wow, I think Frank should still get the start with Luke Del Rio as backup. As usual, I'm in the minority on this one." And then Razo Guru checks us out every now and then. He responded to hers, "You're not alone. I think having Luke Del Rio in relief gives Franks the reps needed to develop. But if Luke Del Rio really makes us better, then you have to play him." Patrick Smith, "I think you give Felipe Franks one more shot. Try not to hold the UK game against him. It was his first true road start. That place was very hostile. Felipe Franks isn't going to learn without game reps now. If we get in position again like last week, then you bench him and go with Del Rio again." Christopher Yanes, "We need to develop the future. It's not fair. We don't open the playbook for Franks, but we do for Luke Del Rio." But we kind of discussed why that could be the case. Maybe Franks just doesn't know the whole playbook, and like you said, he can't having trouble getting past that first read right now. Chris James, "That's a tough call. I'd probably go with Del Rio just to see if he can move the offense with some consistency." And let's see, we'll get one more. Of course, Lucas Mann, "Franks could be really great, but he is not ready yet. If we had the great defense, I would say Franks, but defense reminds me of 2007. Yep. Right now, we are too young." So thanks for the interaction out there, guys. A lot more comments on that, but kind of.
And you have to look at Del Rio. You have to look at Del Rio in two phases, David. I just talked about it. Prior to the injury, David, he looked pretty good, and after the injury, he looked really bad. Yeah. So you have to hope that a healthy Del Rio is actually a pretty decent quarterback.
Yeah, my only worry before he got hurt, not only worry, my complaint before he got hurt was they just didn't press the ball down the field enough. It was his yards per completion were not very good. They played a Kentucky game, and he looked, he looked really good against Kentucky last year. Looked like a vintage Florida quarterback of old in that game. The North Texas was the week later and was just never the same after that. So Yeah, that's kind of how it was. So hopefully they can press the ball downfield a little bit more.
And Appleby played in this game last year against Vanderbilt. Appleby did. Yeah, and he was terrible. He was atrocious. I think he fumbled the ball on the goal. No, we were in the red zone twice, right? Didn't he have 2 red zone fumbles?
Yeah, it was a week after Tennessee. And then one fumble was it might have been a snap on the goal line, but I think there was definitely that stupid toss play they try every now and then, and that happened. So, Mark, what you think? What the Gators need to do against Vanderbilt? Coming up, Joey said noon game. They got to get up for it, of course, and that's kind of been a bugaboo for Florida with these noon games. But there's no excuse for that part of it.
No, you're absolutely right. Joey said it best. I just want to see 60 minutes of football. Give me a complete game. And you're right, David. Noon kickoff, especially against Vandy, every year. This is a slugfest. It is ugly. Just give me and then move on to that October schedule. I feel like you shouldn't move on. Just give me the W. Make it clean. Get your defense going. Let's get an easy win and move on. I feel bad. I'm looking at Texas A&M. I'm looking at LSU. I'm trying not to, but just get through Vandy. Get the W this weekend. And just, hey, I'm excited from the standpoint of I'd like to see what Cleveland can do, and I'd like to see what Tony can do moving forward. Like, is that okay? Like, I want to see these guys make plays. I want to see what the offense can do. That's what I'm looking forward to this Saturday.
That's the weird things, and we've seen it from this offense, and we keep pointing to it, but you can tell there are pieces there. So maybe this is the game with Del Rio coming in. Maybe this is the game that they kind of spread the ball around a little bit more and get everybody involved with Tony from the Wildcat. I think Brandon Powell had his best game as a Gator against Kentucky, so maybe he can build upon that, and just hopefully the suspension talk all week of these 9 players isn't a distraction with a noon game heading up. I think the Swamp is ready. They like watching this team at home, of course, but noon games the crowd's kind of slow arriving, so hopefully fans get there and get the ball rolling, but. Ralph Webb is not the Ralph Webb we've seen the last couple of years for Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's having trouble running the ball right now, but Florida's having trouble stopping the run right now. So it may be a head clashing of weaknesses there. Kyle
the rush defense was really good on Saturday, David. The rush defense actually played pretty good. It was the pass defense that wasn't that good.
Yeah, but I think Bill threw out a stat last night for the last show. Yards per carry has went up every game.
Mm-hmm.
From Michigan to Tennessee to Kentucky. So, but I did like the way they kind of clamped down in the fourth quarter that, Kentucky wasn't able to move the ball. They kind of got a little conservative, but you know what, that's their fault, not the Florida's defense's fault. So that defensive line really came to play in that fourth quarter. So yeah, I mean, Kyle Shermer, he's the guy that you probably have to, look out for and being a better quarterback, but against this Florida secondary, not so sure. If Florida can just stop, and we talked about this last night, if Florida can just stop the chunk plays, not give Vanderbilt these chunk plays, then you should pretty much be able to control that offense.
I just want to see the defensive line kind of build off of what it did in that fourth quarter, like you said, David. CeCe Jefferson was SEC Player of the Week for a reason. Right. He had a really good game, and talk about a guy like Ja'Kai Polite. He just doesn't he just get better every game? Yeah. It almost seems like he just gets better every game, and that's what we said about Marcus May last year up until he got injured. He got better every game. And Ja'Kai Polite is kind of that guy. So the linebacker depth is a huge issue. Voshan will be back, right? Because he got suspended in the first. He got kicked out in the first half, so he will be back. Yeah. So obviously having him back in the start of that game is going to be huge. But Vanderbilt's offense, Ralph Webb, he didn't get an offer from Florida. He went to Gainesville High School, and he takes it personal. For some reason, he plays Florida better than anybody on the schedule, and it always scares me when he's there. So I will say he's somebody that Florida's defensive line is going to have to really, really focus their attention on. But I just want to throw the ball around the parking lot a little bit on Saturday. And let Malik Davis kind of set up the play action. Maybe now we can set up some play action. Now that the running game seems to have found its groove, these are plays that I've been waiting to see for the last couple of games that we haven't. So, but you know what? I think Florida goes into this game, and if I'm Jim McElwain, I tell the team, look, it's a new season. Florida's at home until November, guys. Florida does not leave the state of Florida until November. That's insane. This doesn't happen very often, ever. So, I would, if I was Jim McElwain, I would tell my team, I would say, look, it's a brand new season. You're 2-0 in the SEC right now. Forget about that Michigan game. It doesn't count. It's an out-of-conference game. Michigan's a really good team, and that game is going to look like, if there is a good loss, quote unquote, it's going to look like a good loss at the end of the year. Don't worry about that game. Put it out of your mind. It's a brand new season. We started home against Vanderbilt. Then, you got a home stretch of LSU, Texas A&M, 2 more SEC games. Then you get a bye week. You go play Georgia, and that game will probably decide the SEC East winner, as it should every year. That game should and has been over the last 10 years deciding the SEC East winner. So I really want McElwain just to tell the team to forget everything that's happened prior to this game and start this season anew. I want to see explosive plays from us and not give up explosive plays. This team is too good offensively to not be able to score 30 points a game. And I've said I'm done with Nussmeier. I think he's been holding this team back offensively, and he's going to have to prove a lot of people wrong over the next 6 to 7 games. And that's what I want to see. I want to see Florida go out and completely dominate from start to finish, and I want Florida to win by 4 touchdowns. This is a game where you have to beat the brakes off of somebody and prove that you're actually a contender in the SEC East for real this year.
You want to follow that up, Mark?
Love Joey. I think he put this on Twitter earlier today. And you two are great on Twitter, especially during the Gators football game. It's a fantastic follow. I just want you to know that. I love Joey. He wrote something like, he was talking about the top 25 rankings. He's like, oh, maybe if the Gators win the SEC, they could be ranked finally with all these voters.
Yeah, Barrett Salee does not have Florida in his top 25, so.
Problem. Okay, I'm sorry to tell you that. It's this team. No one wants this team to get back to Atlanta. It is a no one believes in us type team. You're absolutely right. Take out the whooping stick and beat Vandy and then move forward. And you're right. It does come out to Jacksonville. It always does. It's going to be against Georgia. And I'm sorry, I have to say this real quick on your podcast. Is Nick Chubb 45 years old? How long has he been at Georgia? Like, seriously. Taping him. How long has he been there? But no, you're right, man. No one respects this team. Let's get the W on Saturday if you're the Florida Gators.
It's because it's ugly, and it's been ugly. And people wanted Kentucky to beat Florida so bad on Saturday. I really think that Kentucky losing to Florida caused people to get sick to their stomach. The narrative was pushed so hard all week last week that Kentucky was going to beat Florida. This is the best Kentucky team Florida's faced. This is one of the worst Florida teams Kentucky's faced. It's a recipe for a Kentucky win in 30 years and blah, blah, blah. And then boom, Kentucky loses. And everybody that picked Kentucky to win and wanted Kentucky to win is like, oh crap, what do we do right now?
They still call them the better team is what they do.
Yes, even though the numbers say otherwise, but I digress. Florida outscored Kentucky 14-3 in the fourth quarter, but yet they only want to bring up the fourth down open wide receiver and the touchdown open wide receiver. When the touchdown open wide receiver was on a first down, Florida was on the 6-yard line, and like you said, David, Florida would have probably scored on that play anyway. Kentucky's defense was absolutely gassed, and Florida would have scored whether Freddie Swain was open or not. So this is a game where you got to kind of prove yourself. You got to prove yourself who you are. And I want to piggyback on Georgia real quick. Kirby Smart said something interesting today. Jacob Eason might be healthy for this game. I want Jacob Eason to start this game because if they go out and go to Knoxville and lay an egg and let Butch Jones beat them with Jacob Eason starting, I think it ruins Georgia's season. I do.
He cannot do that. He cannot do that.
And Butch Jones is gonna win this game. Watch, guys. He's gonna win this game.
Oh, I think it's a good game.
I think he's gonna piss off every Tennessee fan that has been rooting for losses to build upon to get rid of him. Tennessee fans want this guy gone, like now.
I don't know why. I do think it's a close game. I think it's one of those vintage Tennessee Georgia games we've seen the last couple of years. I know it's bad. I know Tennessee's look bad, and I know they coulda, shoulda, woulda.
We are rooting for Tennessee to win. We want Tennessee to win.
Oh yeah, I agree. But they could have, should have, would have lost to UMass last week. Georgia beats the brakes off of Mississippi State. It's looking like a game Georgia should go in there and roll. But I'm expecting one of those classic Georgia-Tennessee.
Yeah. I'm a Vol for life this weekend, baby. Let's go. Let's go. Big Orange.
Tennessee won this game last year. I mean,
yeah, barely. Barely.
Hail Mary.
Yeah, Hail Mary. Yep. Josh Dobbs to Hunter, right? No, who was it? Who was it?
Was it Jennings?
Jennings, was it? Yeah.
Saturday. I think that's what you're telling me. It's Monday night. I think we're ready for these games.
We are.
Yes.
We are. All right, Mark, let everybody know where they can find you on Twitter and your radio show out there.
All right. It's Mark Moses' show on the Twitter. It's not as cool of a follow as Gators Breakdown, but I'm trying. Okay. And by the way, I'm also trying to grow the Joey V. LeBron beard as well. It will never look as cool as Joey's, but I'll try. Shave the mustache off after a while and really grow it Abe Lincoln style. I think that's what you need to do.
No, my wife will kill me.
Where can they find you, Mark?
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah. Prediction, Mark? You got a prediction for us before you go?
Oh, we're going Vandy, Florida. I will go 31-14. That's my score.
Nice.
There we go. And Mark, let them know where they can find your show at.
Yeah, on Sports Radio 1560 The Fan and online at sportsradio1560.com.
Sounds good. Joe, anything else before we sign off on this one, my friend?
Yeah, I told you, no score predictions after the Michigan game. I'm not doing it, but I got Florida big in this one. I think Florida actually does something in this game. I think this is the game where Luke Del Rio's starting. I think the offense clicks. And I think the defense plays well at home with the home crowd behind them. I have Florida big, actually. I think Florida's going to win by a couple touchdowns.
Sounds good. As a reminder, we'll have Trey Wallace on from the Ultimate SEC Show and the Read Optional. That'll be the next episode tomorrow, and he'll update us on the suspensions and the charges for these players, or potential charges for these non-suspended players. And then Will Miles and I will have an episode later this week where we preview even more in depth the game against Vandy. So for Mark and for Joe, I'm Dave. Thanks for listening to Gators Breakdown.